Hey, good afternoon. I wanted to make a bat cave phone call to my buddy in Puerto Rico, Dr. Charest. Mark, it's great to see you. How are you today?
Hey, good. Look, we've been hanging in there. We've seen some interesting market conditions lately.
Well, to say the least, let's jump in. This right now, we're in the midst of potentially the third straight year of a 20% downturn or more in the S&P Biotech Select Index. Like your observations, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, so let's look at the big picture, right? So, as you mentioned, we're in the third year. So, we're in the 12th quarter now of this pullback, which is the longest in history. It's also the deepest at a 65% peak to trough drawdown. We're actually retesting the lows, which were first reached during the pandemic lockdowns and then retested in last year in 2022 in June. And here we are again, kind of right at this level. And this index, just for a little bit of historical context, has never had two down years in a row, let alone three, right? So to have three, two 20s in the bag, and we're down kind of 20-ish as we sit here at the moment. It's pretty remarkable times we've seen. And very acutely in the past five sessions, the index has moved more than 2% peak to trough each day. And two of those moves were greater than two sigma moves if you look at the histogram of returns for the index. So, high volatility, retesting the lows, it's certainly, I would say, sort of an extreme moment for the sector.
Well, readers of your digest will know we had some actually decent earnings numbers from some of these companies. We've seen some of drug approvals, or at least moving forward with some drugs that are really good news. We've seen, I think it was $17 billion of M&A activity in October. So clearly this isn't tied to necessarily fundamentals per se. So what's your hunch or your sense of what's pushing this down so much?
Yeah, look, there are definitely some good things happening, but let's zoom back again to where this all started. Kind of going back to March 2021, that was the peak, and that was coming off of record number of new companies becoming public, and there was a lot of exuberance in biotech, and markets were pretty frothy. So I would characterize the pullback we had done up into 2021 as more of too far too fast. There were some really aggressive valuations. You couldn't do DCF math on some of these companies, particularly some of those in the gene editing space and some of these sectors that were really in vogue at the time. Multi-billion dollar market cap for preclinical companies that had taking yet, just as an example. So that made sense. And I'd say last year you started to see some data from some of these new companies, and some of it was mixed, and there were some positives. So I'd say the drawdown was maybe a little more kind of in line, relative to performance updates from the companies. This year, I would say, you mentioned we've seen some good news on the M&A front, and we've had some positive clinical regulatory events for sure. We've had some negative ones too, right? They're there. But I would say what I've seen, in the past weeks, and certainly within the past week, is the selling pressure bringing assets now below, in many cases, what we see as being fair value. So it's we've come full circle, right? So look, the drawdown 2 years ago made sense to us. We were able to avoid a lot of those names. The drawdown recently is really, I would say, cutting pretty deep and taking assets further below what some might already consider fair value. And so it's a different environment. We're looking at this as, look, this is part of the bottoming process. It's ugly to get down to the bottom, and this is the type of thing you see, but it certainly makes us more confident that at least we're closer to the bottom than the top. And because there's some there's going to be more M&A, right? There's going to be more positive clinical regulatory events. We think that the companies that can survive this downturn, not all of them will, but those that do, are going to be set up well to come out the other side looking pretty good.
Well, as you know, I live in the Puerto Rico of the Midwest here, out in Omaha, and one of our local celebrities is a big value guy. I think you said in your most recent digest, 30% of companies are trading below cash value. Man, that sounds like an opportunity for those who can kind of hang in there and are willing to have a honest view of what the potential for this market is on the other side of what you said might be the frothy bottom.
Yeah, it's kind of a shocking statistic to see, more than 30% of the development stage biotech company publicly traded universe trade below cash on the balance sheet. We've seen elevated levels of companies below cash before, obviously during the financial crisis, and we've seen it at other brief periods. We've never seen it at this level, Jonathan. So clearly, there's selling pressure on a broad based across the sector. And look, as I mentioned before, some of these companies are going out of business, right? Some of them are going away, but not all of them. And there's some really interesting plays in there. Actually, we've been sharpening our pencils on this universe of companies, and there's actually at least one that currently has positive EBITDA, which is kind of shocking to have a company trade below cash. Clearly, there's operational issues that are on the horizon for these businesses, right? Let's not pretend that everything's perfect, but should there be a resolution, you can imagine that value can be unlocked. So it's a very interesting time, again, to see so many companies trading, below cash. It's pretty shocking. And I would say, in addition to that, if you even expand it out to, companies that aren't quite below cash yet, but are trading at a very depressed, enterprise value, sub $100 million, that's even a much larger number. So, there's certainly a lot of pessimism across the development stage universe at the moment.
Right. Well, where there's pessimists, there's opportunities, as they say. So we'll count on you to help us find those opportunities. Thanks, Mark. As always, it's great to see you. Have a great weekend. Dust it off, and let's get ready for continued success for the rest of the year here. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Take care.